Open world games are big. They're not just big, they're huge. Have you ever watched the final credits of a AAA game? They just go on forever like the closing credits of a Hollywood blockbuster. Whether you're a gunslinger in the Wild West, surviving the apocalypse, adventuring through dungeons, surviving strange new worlds, or just surviving the world, there is probably an open world game for you, and I'm sure you have your favourites. And to be honest, I'm partial to an open world adventure myself. In fact, my other half was kind enough to get me a couple of Assassin's Creed titles for Christmas. But where did the open world game come from? And where did it all begin? To do this, we need to take a trip back in time and see where it all started, and look at what games started it all and influenced these types of games today. Well, I suppose to find the answer we need to understand what we mean by an open world. For me, an open world is essentially a playing space, environment, or world where you're free to move around, explore, and interact freely with the surroundings and create a feeling of freedom as opposed to a classic linear style arcade scroller. Some of the earliest games that create an interactive environment were the humble text adventure. These types of games were really popular on the 8-bit micros of the 80s, with such games as the original Oregon Trail and Zork. But it was the adventure game The Hobbit in 1982 that got me my first experience of this type of game on my Commodore 64. It was also the first time I came across the Tolkien world of Middle-earth. The Hobbit went on to be a bestseller on the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64 and the BBC. It's thought that this game may have sold up to 500,000 copies, making it one of the biggest adventure games of all time. The game itself felt so huge, and I remember those words when you first start the game: you are in a comfortable tunnel-like hole. And the images and graphics were brilliant for the time. And like open world games of today, The Hobbit had NPCs, each moving independently and having their own alignment and loyalties. I could go on about this game for hours. This is definitely a game that gave you an early immersive feel of freedom, albeit text-based. However, there were other types of games already appearing that were not text adventures. The original Ultima game, developed by Richard Garriott, was released in 1981 and is an open world role-playing game that went on to spawn a series. The game is accepted by many as being highly influential in the world of RPGs and possibly the first open world game. The game presents itself in both top-down third-person perspective for navigating the world and first-person perspective for adventuring through the dungeons. Ultima is a game that you can quickly find yourself invested in as you generate your beloved character's race and skill set. The game takes place in the fictional world of Caesarea and is full of different towns and dungeons to discover and explore, not to mention all the beasts and nasties out there. The size of the world was huge for the time, and is only limited by the system's limitations it was built for. This is a game over the years that's just got bigger and bigger, with many sequels being produced.
Will you become one of the elite?
You can't talk about the early days of open world games without acknowledging Elite. Elite allows you to travel outside your bedroom or living room and allows you to trade, pirate, hunt your way through the universe to obtain credit, which can be exchanged for ship and weapon upgrades. Elite was designed, developed and programmed by David Braben and Ian Bell. The two met at Cambridge, and despite their original game demo being rejected by Thorn EMI, it was Acornsoft who were impressed enough to give them a deal that would give the two university students money to bring their game to market. It took them over 2 years to write the game, with final adjustments being made right up until the 11th hour. This was now the first 3D open world space game the world had ever seen. Being able to play a space game and pilot your own ship through outer space was mind-bending. It seemed like you had the ability to go anywhere. The game developers took inspiration from works such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, Star Wars and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, as well as role-playing games such as Traveller. I was in awe of this game. It just seemed so open. It had 8 galaxies, each with 200 planets to explore. It may look simple on the eye with its vector line graphics, but it was perfect for the 8-bit micros of the time. And they were born out of necessity due to the lack of memory at the time on the BBC Micro, which the game was initially developed for. To say this game was huge is an understatement. The game was a massive commercial and critical success, a phenomenon. The release of the game was a pretty big affair too, being held at a UK theme park along with TV advertising and even a novel called The Dark Wheel that came along with the game and set the mood and atmosphere of the universe. Not all games are about adventuring hobbits or intergalactic space trading. Some games are set more in the realms of everyday reality-ish. And in 1986, Durell brought us Turbo Esprit by Mike Richardson. Now, while this game does have a story of a special agent trying to stop a drug deal from taking place, the way this game was made essentially lets you drive a sports car around the city, overtaking cars, stopping at traffic lights, or not stopping at traffic lights if that's what you decide. You were basically in control of the route you took around this fictional city. And this essentially gave you a real feeling of freedom. I don't think I ever actually completed this game because I was too engrossed in free roaming the map. And the details were great for the time too. Other cars, traffic lights, zebra crossings for people to cross. You can even stop and refuel the car. I think what this game did was brilliant and go as far as saying it was pioneering for the time. It's been said that this game could even be the genesis for the Grand Theft Auto series and holds a Guinness World Record for being the first open world driving game.
Did you see the latest Nintendo newsletter? Whoa, nice graphics! I'd like to get
Now, by the mid-80s, open world games were really starting to take off, with some pretty well-known titles starting to put in an appearance. But one game in particular literally became legend. The Legend of Zelda. The original Zelda game was developed at the same time as Super Mario Bros., with Mario Bros. Being developed as a typical linear style arcade game and the other taking a much more open world style. When The Legend of Zelda came out in Japan in 1986, it spawned a franchise that still lives on today. Although there were worries at the time that players, particularly outside Japan, would find the approach too complex and not take to the heavy reliance on reading. But in the end, the worry was unfounded, and The Legend of Zelda probably did more to popularise the non-linear style than any other game. And with sales of over 6 million copies worldwide, it's hard to ignore or fail to acknowledge Zelda's contribution not only to the open world game, but to gaming full stop. You can't talk about 80s video games without talking about pirates. No, not that kind of pirates, but, you know, Pirates by Sid Meier. When Pirates hit the shelves in 1987, it was a huge hit for publisher Microprose. Designed by Sid Meier, this was the first game of its kind that I couldn't wait to get my hands on. All of the games I bought with interest, yes, but this was a game that I really couldn't wait to get my hands on. I mean, who didn't want to be a pirate growing up? The game, in my opinion, is a perfect blend of everything that came before it. Strategy, puzzles, and even arcade action, and it's completely open in its top-down approach. The game is set in the 15 and 1600s, and set in the Caribbean of course. And as a true open world game, you can choose how you want to play. You can defend your home nation's interests, go treasure hunting, search for long lost family members, trade, or just, you know, be a pirate and attack anything that sails and steal its glorious booty. There was nothing better than seeing a larger ship than yours on the horizon, with the possibility of taking it over. Of course, you would have to attack the ship and get close enough to invade with a boarding party and ultimately take out the enemy captain, but this would allow you to add the ship to your own fleet, giving you greater power and capacity for booty and food. The game doesn't really have a specific ending. You can keep adventuring and pirating for as long as you like, although you can't avoid the effects of time itself. As you get older, it becomes harder to recruit, and the battles will take its toll on your body. Personally though, I always try to win the heart of the governor's daughter, a task that can only be done by keeping on the good side of the town's governor and gaining a high enough rank. It's easy to see why this game was ported to other machines and consoles over the years, and even had a remake some years ago. The original game is now 35 years old and still holds up today. In fact, I still enjoy playing this game regularly on my Commodore 64 and Amiga. It's addictive, exciting, and very highly regarded. This, in my opinion, is one of the best games ever made. And there you have it. By the late 80s, it was becoming common for open world games to start being developed by larger teams. This wasn't exclusive to this type of game, of course. The whole industry was changing, with 16-bit machines gaining popularity in the home. The fledgling green shoots of non-linear games had now taken hold and sprouted into its own genre of games. The early days of open world games pretty quickly took root, and this once new style of open world gameplay exploded into existence all over the planet on just about every platform, with some games going on to play a massive part in gaming culture. So the next time the game you play allows you to steal that car and go off-road, collect that scrap and build that new gun, completely ignore the story and go off on your own quest to find some enchanted sword, or simply explore that strange new planet in the depths of the galaxy. Just take a moment to think about those early days where one or two programmers in their bedroom decided to push the boundaries of what was possible at the time. These games were some of my favourite, and it's a subject that I could spend hours talking about. So, what was the first open world game you remember playing? And what became your favourite? Let me know in the comments. And finally, with a new generation of consoles now with us, I can't wait to see what the future holds in the realm of open world games. The future certainly looks exciting. Thank you for coming on this adventure with me. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again soon. Until next time, goodbye.